What do you think is the most important 90s comic book? During a recent English department meeting, the question came up of what was the most important book you've ever read? Like the most significant, most personal book to you. Like real books. My colleagues had brilliant answers like James Joyce and even more accessible stuff like Judy Blume. They expressed their great affection for and knowledge of literature.
To myself, wow.
When it came my turn to answer, I said G.I. Joe 111 with the Jim Lee cover.
Now check out the new Joe!
For my 9th birthday, my Uncle Lou and Aunt Marlene gave me a G.I. Joe action figure, Salvo, which I no longer have, and the aforementioned G.I. Joe comic book, which is one of the few comic books from my childhood that I still have that exact G.I. Joe issue. My 9-year-old mind was blown. The G.I. Joe cartoons with no real threat of danger didn't compare to the comic book with real bullets, blood, and death. The comic opens with a few Joes that were shot and killed in the previous issue. The Saw Viper responsible felt real, not just like some random robotic soldier, or in some cases real robots, but a real bloodthirsty mad soldier. He killed and wanted to kill more. After this, the Ninja Joes, Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, Jinx, and Scarlet infiltrate Cobra territory. They all have baggage. Storm Shadow expresses concern for Snake Eyes' mental well-being, while admits to his own physical limitations, admitting to being slow and a potential physical liability. They weren't the flawed superhero types, or even like flawed superheroes, but flawed people. They were soldiers, sure, and elevated people, but just still people. People on both sides of the fight. The comic left us with a cliffhanger of how these humans will react. Will they gather the intel required, or will they seek personal justice? The comic and storytelling by Larry Hama was brilliant, but compared to stuff I would find shortly after, was a bit of an icebreaker.
Mr. Peter David.
Stories that honestly changed my life, at least my life as a reader. Shortly after, I read a Hulk comic book with a character called Speed Freak. Again, the stakes were raised. The threat of violence and death felt real. In the G.I. Joe comic, it was distilled in a moment where the dead Joe's bodies were covered in a tarp laid across missiles. In Speed Freak, it was distilled when Speed Freak just kind of slaughtered other characters in just this brutal, abrupt way. And where another comic book character mentioned he had AIDS. Now, when you were a little kid in the late 80s and early 90s, AIDS was really scary. It was this nebulous thing that seemed to float out there. There was a lot of talk among other kids about how you might get it and how you could get it. And it really was kind of scary. So to see that in a comic book, it both made that comic book scarier and more real, and helped make AIDS more understandable and approachable. 90s comics get a bad rap of constant crossovers, leather jackets, market crashes, and bankruptcies. And sure, that's all true. But it's also the last time a kid could walk into a grocery store and walk out a comic book fan. But this isn't about nostalgia, at least not in that way. It's about stories, their power, and the people who told them.
I base that on several combinations of structure and characterization. If I'm really going to talk about writing, I do seminars that run about 3 to 4 hours. 3 to 4 minutes is not going to cover it.
While that G.I. Joe comic remains special and holds great personal significance, as I reflect on that question, if I were to answer it today, I realize I would answer it differently. I would answer it with X Factor 87. The single greatest book, comic book, anything ever that I've ever read. X Factor 87 was written by Peter David and is known as the therapy issue. Peter David's first issue on X Factor was X Factor 70. It was actually part 4 of the Muir Island saga. Peter David's first issue wraps up that crossover and is a bridge from the old X Factor to the new one. This was also a major reboot of all the X-Men books. The slightly more famous X-Force #1 by Rob Liefeld and the significantly more famous X-Men #1 by Jim Lee were published at the same time. A soft reboot before I knew what that was. X Factor 71 is where the true new version of the team and the new version of the book really starts.
Quality storylines that really hang together at the beginning, middle, and end are too few and far between. It can be done.
Early in the issue, most of the new team is assembled. Guido, Polaris, Multiple Man, they share a meal as they get to know each other. There are a lot of jokes from Multiple Man and Guido, and a lot of emotional distance from Polaris. A magnetic character repelling people. We also meet Rain, Wolfsbane, who is the cute little wolf monster mascot of the team, who is secretly in love with Havoc. Havoc is rebuilding Genosha. Poor Genosha. Val Cooper, the team's government liaison, is there to recruit him, being Havoc. The tension in the issue is, will Havoc join? Although if you've seen the cover with the matching team uniforms, you could kind of figure it out. The cliffhanger within the comic is the assassination of Multiple Man. But the brilliance of Peter David is the comic establishes the core of who these characters are as they come together as a team. This brings us to X Factor 72, which was my first ever issue of X Factor. The cover hooked me. The characters were just in normal street clothes, well, normal relative to 90s comic book characters. The lingering question from the previous issue remained, who killed Jamie Madrox? We don't know, as a reader, that Jamie isn't dead until page 8. It was actually a dupe, whose job it was to answer the door to keep Jamie safe, which is a wonderful, horrible thing to do to make something made from yourself. It's like if I had my kids to do something like that in a weird, twisted way. I guess I don't know how he views these things that he makes from himself as he makes them to go fight bad guys anyway. This actually gets into the stuff that Peter David would explore in greater depth in X Factor Investigations. The sentience and independence of these dupes, and he does tackle it a little bit in these books, but in much greater depth in X Factor Investigations. Jamie hid until the rest of X Factor showed up. Hey, somebody did want to kill him after all, right? The issue for him, like not the comic book issue, but his issue, he can't absorb the dupe, or couldn't absorb the dupe that's dead on the floor. This rightfully freaks him out. The comic ends with a press conference where Guido names himself Strong Guy, and another dupe of Jamie shows up and chaos just ensues. A quick note on Strong Guy's name, the press just takes it as a joke. He sees him as a joke, and it's really powerful and relatable because he kind of lets himself be the joke sometimes, makes himself look silly to sort of protect the people around him. He'll be the butt of the joke so they don't have to be as a distraction. That's really powerful stuff. Really profound even, that he'll look like an idiot to save the people around him from looking like idiots. Quite beautiful. X Factor 73 gets a bit meta as it opens with a parody of Particle Man, credited to Weird Al in the comic about Multiple Man. The battle between Jamie and the dupe continues through the Smithsonian. The lingering question, who's the dupe? The I'm the real one, no, I'm the real one thing, before I felt like it was done to death, at least before I had seen it to death, right? The first time I know I read it in a comic book. I'm sure it had been done plenty before this in both film and television, but what am I? I'm not even 10 at this time, so for me it was new. Again, Jamie's freaked out because he can't feel the dupe. And somehow this moment becomes that much more profound with the recent passing of Peter David. The creator can't connect with his work. As a kid, the first time I cried when a celebrity died was when Jim Henson passed away.
I like it when they have a good time.
He was the first creative person that I knew made creative things, that did a creative thing. Someone I could admire, someone I did admire. When I read comics, I was, at this time, more focused on the artist. In this case, the great Larry Strobin. Props to him for something really unique here as well. But soon I would become obsessed with comic book writers. In the fight, Jamie uses a Kermit puppet that's on display at the Smithsonian to attack the other Jamie. It was a funny gag at the time, however, it may have been a tribute to the recently passed Jim Henson. Reading it, reflecting on art, significant things that have impacted me as a creative person, and just as a human that's touched by these things, I can't help but see a connection there. As to the specific issue, we get the walking meme of Strong Guy snapping at the media, breaking out of the I'm a joke character, asking the media why they have to throw the qualifier of mutant heroes when they criticize them, when they blame them for, destroying the Smithsonian. We get some praise for Peter David in the letter section, and before that we get an emotional Polaris calling out Havoc, but doing so lovingly for Havoc's attempts to be like his brother. The little brother can be the leader, right? Asking for a friend. Now, I mentioned how issue 71 set up the team, but the real building of the team took place over these 3 issues. With that, we jump ahead a lot to issue 87 that I mentioned a while back. In these 16 issues, the theme is much more firmly established. The characters more fully know themselves, and they fully know each other, and Val Cooper certainly knows them. Or does she? Or do they? In the early 90s, X Factor was a comic that I didn't miss an issue. I filled out one of these. We had a P.O. box at the time, and they'd sometimes fold them and crease it right down the middle. That was the worst. But it was worth the risk to make sure I had that in my house every single month. I think I even convinced my mom to get the bundle deal so you save more, because I also had subscriptions to Uncanny X-Men and Amazing Spider-Man, which was awesome. 3 comics in the mailbox at the time, but that sometimes, like I said, meant that you had 3 comics stuffed in there. If those rare days where they all came at once, that resulted in some creased covers. But I was a comic reader, not a collector at the time. Well, I was also a collector because it's inevitable. Issue 87 is also the first by Joe Quesada, taking over for Jay Lee, who, in my collection, is most famous for this cover. And X Factor 87 is one heck of a place to start. A character-driven story, but also has great moments of unique expression. There are moments of comic book style expression, but also he shows his talent for great emotional expression. And 90s comic book style hair. Also, I tried really hard to have multiple man's haircut as a kid. Everyone thought I wanted John Connor's haircut from Terminator 2.
It's from out of town. I just thought I'd...
But it's this, right here, multiple man's haircut. That's what I was going for.
We got Skynet by the balls now, don't we?
The comic opens with a Ren and Stimpy cartoon, a parody of Ren and Stimpy, which was insanely popular at the time. Like, huge. Hot take? Cold one? I don't know. I never got it. I love the log thing though. That was great.
It's great for a snack and fits on your back. It's log.
The rest of Range Dreams also focus on movies and her identity through the filter of pop culture parodies. Upon this, she's sure the therapist will only ask questions. However, he tells her what he sees. He sees that she lacks a sense of self, so she identifies with these things, which maybe a lot of us do. Sometimes. He tells her she does this because she's putting on different personalities like shoes. Her dreams also reveal a reliance on authority figures. Rain admits to a fatherly love of Professor X, hey, that's great, but goes silent when pressed about Havoc. Things start to get more complicated over there. He then asks about Reverend Craig, who raised her. She snaps. Much more complicated over there. She leans on authority because the adult Rain she seeks what the kid Rain never had. Next up is Quicksilver, and what is perhaps the most famous portion of this comic, and something Peter David addressed in his great book on comic book writing. When asked why he doesn't wear the team uniform, he blames the team, saying they never offered him one. The therapist counters, did he ask? He then admits he prioritizes his individual identity. He then talks about why he's arrogant, why he's frustrated. He talks about the analogy of being in line at a bank. You're waiting for someone who is fumbling through their wallet, fumbling to find their bank card, fumbling through it, can't find the right card, pulls out the wrong card, puts that back in, over and over, whatever, they go through this process, slow and fumbling as I'm fumbling through my words in this sentence. That's every moment of his life. Every second of his life, every microsecond of his life. While I prefer the X-Men movie version of Quicksilver, the arrogance of the MCU one really is more accurate to the character.
You didn't see that coming?
In his book on writing comics, Peter David mentioned how this came from his own impatience with others. During her session, Polaris stares at a dish of candy and mentions how her recent broken jaw helped her lose weight. She compares herself to other women, which in the X-Men comics of the 90s that's a heck of a lot of pressure. Let's be honest. Like, a ridiculous amount of pressure. She insists she won't let the therapist in her head because her head has literally been invaded. And again, that's pretty heavy stuff. Prior to all this, in Executioner's Song, where Strife, disguised as Cable, shoots Professor X with a techno-organic bullet, X-Force became outlaws, so X-Factor, of course, being the government team, had to go after them, and of course they fought. There's more to all this, but this changed Polaris. And her mind was taken over in the process. And again, this at least taps into the ramifications of not being in control of your own mind, your own body, and the implications of all that. Polaris has the power of magnetism, but she repels things, repels people. She feels repulsive. She's not, but she feels that way. Is this where M. Night Shyamalan learned about superhero rules? Seeking only for Unbreakable here. I haven't seen the other stuff.
I believe comics are our last link to an ancient way of passing on history.
Guido shares his own tragic story. He's smart, geeky, but wants to impress the dream girl. One day she winked at him and he thought something magical was going to happen. He thought a dream was about to come true, but it turned into a nightmare. He got punched by the dream girl's boyfriend. But he lost it and fought back, hulking out. Like actually hulking out, and like his arms got all freaking big and stuff. And like literally as a gang of bullies beat him and kicked him, his arm became muscular and huge, not unlike my own. And then the bus hit him. At the time, he didn't know this, but he absorbed kinetic energy, and that's what made his muscles all big and freaky. He had not yet learned how it worked. He also reveals that this caused him constant, unbearable pain, but he buries that pain in his goofy persona. I can't help but think of Robin Williams, someone who was outwardly funny and full of life and joy and made us all laugh, but carried a lot of pain.
Thank you, boys.
Next, things get chipper with Multiple Man, and by chipper I mean put through a wood chipper. Jamie begins with a joy buzzer, and I have a feeling that masking pain with humor is a theme here. In word association activity, the therapist says up, and Jamie says away. And a nice nod to Superman, and then the therapist says alone, and Jamie says hell. He reveals his childhood isolation on his parents' farm with his dead parents. The doc asks a challenging question that if his replies to the word association are genuine, or if their responses to get attention to make up for the fact that his parents were dead when he was a child. And Jamie's response is genuine and authentic, that he's not sure, that he doesn't know which, if they're authentic or if they're just responses to get a reaction. If he does it all to be noticed and not be alone. Finally, Havoc, my favorite member of the team and my favorite X-Men character in general. Alec can't relax. The burden of being a superhero, a leader. Havoc constantly worries that he can't live up to the expectation of his brother, Cyclops. Scott is respected. Havoc has to earn respect. He also refuses to ask the team if he's doing a good job for fear that they'll say that he isn't. A bit later, Polaris shows back up in a very 90s female character way, and I love the way this is utilized to have her in this ridiculous female comic character getup in a way that is her trying to get attention in a way when she somehow wants it but doesn't want it. It works in a way that, because the women in comics in the 90s particular dressed like this, and you'd be like, what, why? Or no one said that. But here we're saying, why are you doing this in the context of what we know about her in this issue? So it's really powerful to see. Who is she doing this for? Why is she doing this to herself? It's really something that this issue did this. Finally, Val gives her view of the team. She's just dead wrong. She only sees the stereotypes of what they should be. What you see if you just look at the cover of the comic. That's what Val sees. She sees strong guy as the strong guy, and so on. The roles they should play, and can't understand why they can't be a normal team. Off screen, he tells her she lacks awareness. That she is the problem. She doesn't agree, but then she is attacked by a giant tentacle monster as she walks away. We also learned that the therapist is Doc Samson from Peter David's equally great run on The Incredible Hulk. In his book on writing comics, Peter David said, write what you know. A lot of people say that about writing. They're right. Use yourself, your experiences, the things around you, and put it into your work. Clearly he did that here. He may not be all the characters, but pieces of him and pieces of the people he encountered are all over his writing.
I see people who say that they want to be writers and they don't read. I'm not just talking about reading comic books. I'm talking about reading books, novels, histories, mythologies, biographies, things to be drawn from the real world. That's at least how I would do it, because once you bring that real world feeling to a comic book, it then rings true to the reader and makes it more involved in what's going on. It feels right. Okay.
At some time in the late 2000s or early 2010s, Peter David was doing a signing at Golden Apple Comics on Melrose in LA. I really wanted to go, but I didn't. I'm sure I fabricated some great excuse to myself. My late great writing teacher, Sid Stiebel, once told me something to this effect, that he never regretted going to a party that he wanted to go to. My guess is that he was giving me that advice about a similar event that I was trying to talk myself out of.
The eye of the future sees them. 5 clever space cadets snuck aboard an alien ship, flung through a weird hole in space, thousands of light years from the Academy. Yeah, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but will they ever get home? Or are they forever destined to be space aces?
On March 2nd, 1996, coincidentally my 14th birthday, Space Cases, a show created by Peter David, premiered. That show made him a lot of money. Unfortunately, his wife withdrew quite a bit of that money, and that's also how he found out his marriage was ending. What he had left went to divorce lawyers, and then eventually the IRS came calling. Time went on, and the tax bill theme, it seemed to be forgotten. Until 2017, that is. They remembered with interest. A GoFundMe that I was not aware of at the time helped pay off that debt. I share this because even when we make it, we don't always really make it. Just like the members of X Factor, we're still struggling to be part of a team. When you have your greatest financial success, it can also be connected to one of your greatest failures in life. Peter David married his second wife in 2001. I do want to share the silver lining, the other side of the rainbow, I don't know what cliche, but there was a happier part that came after. It gets sad again. A few years later, Peter David wrote what I believe is his greatest ongoing storytelling triumph in X Factor investigations. Perhaps that personal struggle and difficulty helped elevate his storytelling to an even greater level. A few years later, another GoFundMe was created due to ongoing health issues. Access to medical care can be an issue for many of us, and we can set aside any political arguments and look at the corporation for which Peter David worked. Disney bought Marvel in 2009 for $4.2 billion, and I'm sure they've filled bank vaults of money based on everything Marvel related since then.
Swimming in it!
Just for context, Peter David's most recent Marvel work, Symbiote Spider-Man 2099 #1, was released in March of 2024. Peter David passed away on May 24th, 2025. Peter David deserved better. Perhaps the multi-billion-dollar corporation he worked for could have paid for his health insurance. Perhaps the system could be better. One of the greatest comic book writers of all time should not have to endure at the end of his life as he did. I didn't know Peter David, but I did know Coleman Huff. Her work didn't reach a level of impact that Peter David's did. However, she did write a feature film for a major Hollywood director, Steven Soderbergh, with Full Frontal. It was one of his small art films. However, with every movie, book, song, you name it, it's somebody's favorite. Somebody out there, I guarantee you, that's their favorite film. And rightfully so. It's an excellent film. Like Peter David, she passed away. Coleman passed away in anonymity at the Actors Fund home in New Jersey. And she deserved better. She only had the care she had at the end of her life because of her connections to the entertainment industry. Maybe it speaks to greater social issues about healthcare. That's not me, and I'm not here to speak to those things. But in both instances, those industries have a history of exploiting and casting off the people who do the work to the profit of the people at the top. This isn't about all that. This is about stories and the influence they have on people, the influence they have had on me. Stories that challenge us and ignite our souls. It's about the people who write them and the people who are inspired by them. Peter David left this world, but he left us a lot to be challenged by and inspired by. Most importantly, he left a wife and 4 daughters: Ariel, Shauna, Gwen, and Caroline. In all this, those are the people that matter the most.
Another characteristic of paralogia is its false dreamlike logic. In his study of schizophrenic thinking, Bueller, 1911, cited a patient who was convinced that he was Switzerland. Such a thought could not even be entertained by the normal mind, but this patient's thinking follow the line. Switzerland loves freedom. I love sweet freedom. I am Switzerland. Ladies and gentlemen, Switzerland.
He's good.